Hello, my name is Joshua Sprague, and I'm a technical consulting engineer for the Cisco Catalyst Center's tech team. Today, I'll be showing you the advanced web installation option of the Cisco Catalyst Center virtual appliance. The Cisco Catalyst Center's OVA release file we will be using in this advanced web installation example will be 2374. The VMware vSphere client version we will be using is 703. As a side note, this is assuming we have already deployed the OVA file for 2374 on our vSphere client and we are ready to proceed with the advanced web installation process. If we haven't deployed the OVA file on vSphere, proceed to do that first before continuing to watch this video. If we don't know how to deploy the OVA file on vSphere, watch the video called Deploy Cisco Catalyst Center as a Virtual Machine and then continue watching this video. The first step that we need to do is to configure the IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway of the enterprise port on the static IP configuration config wizard page. If we want to use a static route for the enterprise port, that is fine, but we don't want to have the default gateway and static routes configured on the same interface. This will cause functionality issues. So we need to choose either the default gateway or static routes on a single interface. As a note, make sure that the enterprise IP address can reach the enterprise network, or this web installation process won't work. After we are done, arrow down to configure and press enter. Note down the URL listed under web installation. Pull up either Firefox or Chrome and type down the URL. Click the Start a Catalyst Center Virtual Appliance radio button and then click on Next. This is where we have the option to either click on Install or Advanced Install option. For this demonstration, we will click on Advanced Install and then click Start. Whenever we are ready, click on Start Workflow. Proceed with clicking the Next button. On this page, we have the opportunity to set up our virtual appliances interfaces. Please take note of the paragraph below the title of this page. If our network resides behind a firewall and/or proxy server, let's make sure that we are allowing through the required FQDNs and ports in order for the upgrade process and functionalities of the Catalyst Center to successfully work in a non-air-gap environment. More details on what's required can be found on the installation and administration guides on Cisco's website. By default, the enterprise interface is already checked off and grayed out. This information gets pulled from the static IP configuration config wizard page from step 1 at the beginning of this video. We could remove the default gateway and add static routes if we want or need to, but we won't for this demonstration. The intra-cluster link network is automatically configured and grayed out because it is needed for the functionalities of Kubernetes and must be present. We do have the option to change the IP address and subnet mask to whatever we want. For this video, we will leave it on the default settings. The management network interface is an optional interface. We could configure this port for the sole purpose of accessing the Catalyst Center's GUI, therefore leaving the enterprise port to just communicate with the network devices or vice versa. Notice that the default gateway IP address text field is grayed out for the management interface. If we read the text below, it says that a default gateway is already configured on the enterprise port. If we want the management interface to be routable and reachable, we will need to configure a static route on it. As a side note, we are able to configure the management interface because we added another network adapter to the virtual appliance before turning it on from vSphere. If we didn't add another network adapter for the VM, then we wouldn't have the option to configure the management interface. This is where the Catalyst Center validates the network schema for the interfaces, testing to see if the default gateway is reachable and if the static routes can communicate with the next hop. Next, we will configure the DNS IP address so that the Catalyst Center can know which DNS server to communicate with. We can configure a maximum of 3 DNS server IPs. Click Next to proceed to configure the DNS configurations. This is where the Catalyst Center validates and see if we can reach the DNS servers. Next, we can configure the proxy server information. If there isn't a proxy server on the network, then we can select the No Radio button and then press Next. If the Catalyst Center needs to go through the proxy server, add the needed information here. In the Advanced Appliance Settings page, we can configure the virtual IP addresses for the interfaces that we have configured. So we could configure a VIP address for the enterprise cluster and management interfaces if we want to, but we aren't going to for this video. As a side note, the paragraph underneath cluster virtual IP addresses is correct if we were setting up an actual physical appliance, but we're not. At this time, setting up a 3-node virtual cluster isn't supported. The text field below the virtual IP addresses is the virtual appliance's hostname. This is the FQDN for the virtual appliance. This field is optional. We only need to configure an FQDN if we are in an FQDN only environment or our company requires it. Below the FQDN text field, we will be putting in the NTP server settings. NTP services are required for validation data from internal and external sources. We are going to leave turn on NTP authentication checkbox unchecked. Next is the subnet settings portion for the container and cluster subnets. These subnets are used internally on the Catalyst Center, so they shouldn't be routable or conflict with internal and external networks. We can change the subnets to use a different subnet ID, but for this demonstration, we are going to leave them on the default settings. Click Next to proceed. On this page, this is where we will create the maglev password so that we can have access to the CLI of our virtual appliance. Type down the password twice and then click Next. On the summary page, this is where we can review our setup and see if we need to edit our settings before committing them. We can also click on the blue hyperlink button so that we can have a local copy of our configuration settings. When we are ready, click on the Start Configuration button to proceed with configuring our virtual appliance. This is where we will see the progress of the installation. The browser wizard screen will continuously update during the process, indicating the tasks that are currently being completed and their progress. We can save a local copy of this information as a text file by clicking the Download Hyperlink button, but this is only available during the upgrade or if an error occurred. The installation process could take roughly 3 to 4 hours, but it will depend on things like bandwidth, RAM, hard disk space, and the number of the CPUs. When the installation process completes, copy the temporary admin username and password and note it down somewhere, and click on the Open Cisco Data Center Virtual Appliance button. It will take us to the login page so that we can use our temporary login credentials in order to create our new credentials that we will be using from now on. As a side note, if it doesn't take us to the login page immediately, that means the services are busy stabilizing. It could take between 15 to 30 minutes for the services to stabilize. After waiting for 15 to 30 minutes, refresh the browser and see if we can set up our new credentials now. We are now ready to proceed with setting up the GUI and start using the Cisco Catalyst Center. Thank you for watching.